And of course, if it's between the hours of 11 and of course 12, Family Matters is on. Good morning, Miss Bondimaitre. Welcome to another edition of Family Matters.
Good morning, Ulan, and good morning, our listeners. Just saying, today I am not 100%, so I may not be doing much talking. But we have a lovely guest this morning, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. I'm trying not to do too much talking before I start coughing. So, our topic for this morning is adverse childhood experiences. So, I'm going to go over to her, so let her introduce herself. Go ahead, Miss. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Ms. Bondimaitre. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Soufriere FM. I am Mrs. Sacha Jn, Pierre-James, and just a little about me. I am currently the EAP manager. This is the Employee Assistance Program Unit, and we are with the Department of the Public Service. We are a work-based intervention program that provides psychosocial support services as well as workplace intervention programs for public officers. We also provide counseling sessions for public servants and their family members. I'm also a counseling psychologist and an author, and I am so happy to be here on the virtual platform with you, Ms. Bondimaitre, and the entire nation of St. Lucia. Thanks again for having me.
You're most welcome. The pleasure is all mine and ours. Yes. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your topic this morning. What you'll be, why did you choose that topic? And tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so for today's session, we are going to be exploring the topic adverse childhood experiences. And I'm hearing you ask why this topic. As I would have mentioned in my brief introduction, I am a counseling psychologist and I've been in the counseling field for quite a number of years, about over 13 years. And one of the things that I've realized is that a lot of persons who are presenting for psychosocial support in their adult lives would have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. So I felt it was fitting to have a discussion on that topic as well as to educate the public. One of the things that I've also realized many times we interface with people, and in our society we're prone to labeling people. And I believe that when we create forums such as yours, and let me take this moment to applaud you and everybody else who's involved, it's important to provide the needed information to sensitize, to bring awareness. So I felt it was fitting to just have a discussion on adverse childhood experiences so people can understand some of the things that they see happening with the children as well as even adults as well.
Okay. Thank you so very much. And if Ellen will remember, we've spoken so much about childhood traumas and how important it is to deal with it. So I'm happy that you are here this morning, a professional, somebody, it is part of your job, what you encounter maybe on a daily basis. And you're here to tell the, again, to re emphasize the importance of how we go ahead and deal with childhood trauma. Thank you so much again.
It's my pleasure and you are welcome. So what I'm going to do, I will be providing you with information as I said. So what are really adverse childhood experiences? Sometimes you may hear a mental health practitioner referring to it as ACEs, and it's really the acronym for adverse childhood experiences. And adverse childhood experiences are traumatic events that occur between the ages of 1 and 17. So most times you would hear persons who would have experienced traumatic events, negative events prior to attaining the age of 18. And these events can actually, and I want to emphasize that, actually affect a child's health, not just physical health, but emotional health. It affects their brain health. And ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, can lead to issues as mental health conditions. And this is why, Ms. Bondimaitre, I mentioned earlier on, it is important for us to provide the information because many times in our society, especially within the education system, the community, we may encounter children who are presenting with behavioral challenges, with even mental health conditions. But are we taking a moment to explore why is it that this particular child is behaving that way? And when we delve into the topic of adverse childhood experiences, we would recognize that any event that has happened, any traumatic event, any stressful event that has occurred prior to attaining the age of 18 can potentially affect a child way into their adult life. And in counseling, we speak a lot about protective factors, and protective factors are essentially just generally things that are put in place to help to protect a person's mental health, to protect their emotional health. And oftentimes, when these things are absent, then we, as mental health practitioner, you are a social worker, and I'm sure that you experience these situations on a daily basis. The clients that present to us do present with a lot of these challenges.
Indeed. Um, Again, that's why I felt the need to re-emphasize because we've had talks about childhood childhood traumas more than once, and this is why I'm so happy that you're here today. Something I noticed that used to happen in the past, and I'm happy now that right now we are educating the public. What I realized before that the victims were were getting they were not getting the help. It's like persons who are affected. For example, long before in a home, if you find a child was maybe sexually abused by an adult, the child was being beaten, the child was not being given help. They would say, okay, it's her fault or his fault for this happening and that happening. And you find, or an adult will tell a child, suck it up, and nothing would be done to help this child. And of course, as the child grows with all the anger and everything and do not have the coping mechanisms, of course, as you said, you would see a lot happening. Yeah.
And you're quite correct. And oftentimes we just recently, as you mentioned the phrase suck it up, I had to correct a client who said, you know what, I'm just going to suck it up and deal with it. And I took that opportunity to clarify because it's really not about sucking it up. And as you rightfully pointed out, Ms. Bodimet, there are times parents, teachers even tell the children, suck it up. But
Yeah.
do you, what really is sucking it up? We are emotional beings. And when we experience challenges, it's important for us to process these emotions. So when
Exactly.
a child has gone through an adverse childhood experience, it's important for them to be able to recognize, I am feeling this particular way now. It is okay that I'm feeling overwhelmed now, for example. Why is it that I'm feeling overwhelmed? Then you teach them how to process the emotions. And you mentioned coping mechanisms, and after they begin to process the emotions, then they're better able to manage these emotions. And I believe a lot of the times our society has perpetuated so many of the problems that we're seeing because we teach our children not to express what they're feeling. How many times have you heard that? And I know because I have been following Family Matters, and I know you have explored this in the past.
Yes. Um, Many times you would hear, and in our society it's about padimunza fenu. What happens at home stays at home. Whatever is happening at home, do not speak about it, do not go out there. Children are being punished actually for going out there and reporting things that affect them in the home. Okay, and even in society, you find persons as saying, even in relationships, you find husbands and wives, they'll be like, whatever happens between my husband and I stays between my husband and I. As much as it is maybe affecting the husband or affecting the wife, it is like sacred. Don't speak about it. And this is quite wrong. Like I've told persons, yes, you will not go out there and tell the world everything that's happening to you. But you need to find a trusted individual or professional to speak with. Because, like I mentioned before, it's just like you have a bottle of Coke. It is still, and when you shake this, it will just explode. So at some point, when you least expect it, when you hold things in, of course it will explode. And a lot of it we are seeing in the schools. We are seeing, because you have children in the school. Sometimes they're quiet, and all of a sudden you're just seeing some behaviors that you cannot even explain, wondering what is really happening. So again, I'm so happy that you're here to speak about the importance of dealing with these childhood experiences. Yeah.
So Neo, you are correct. I just want to, as much as the focus is on adverse childhood experiences, but all of what you just mentioned, totally in sync. And you mentioned suppression. This is what you were essentially referring to. There are times individuals go through challenges, children go through challenges, and because they have not been adequately taught how to process the emotions, how to express the emotions in a healthy way, what you find is that they suppress it. And anything that is suppressed after some point is going to resurface. And what we're seeing, especially with our adults, when people experience outbursts of anger or they engage in violent acts, what you're really seeing is that these individuals may have experienced adverse childhood experiences as children, but because they did not deal with it, and sometimes, most times, not totally their fault, because people have to be taught how to. And, back in the olden days, our parents, our grandparents did not know how to manage these challenges, and they would often engage in what they say in patois, you say, arrangement, so somebody would have abused their child or their grandchild, and instead of dealing with the situation, they engage in arrangement. I'm going to give you this amount of money, let's keep it on the time. And you find people presenting in the adult lives with so many mental health conditions. And going back to the concept of suppression, they would have suppressed it. They would not have said that to anybody. And I can tell you, as a mental health practitioner, Ms. Bondimaitre, many times when clients present in the adult lives, sometimes it's the first time that they're disclosing that I was abused as a child. I encountered this challenge as a child.
Okay. Indeed, so true. Can you tell us? It is a variety of symptoms, many different behaviors, but can you tell us some of the um, most common behaviors that somebody who has had childhood traumas or gone through some traumatic experience would show?
Okay, so just before I get into some of the signs, what I'm going to do is to provide the public with some information, some examples of what childhood experiences are, adverse childhood experiences. So we have examples such as experiencing violence or abuse or neglect. We've already spoken about the abuse. Having a family member who has attempted or died by suicide. So when we're speaking of adverse childhood experiences, many times people might think, okay, it's abuse. And if I have not experienced abuse, whether it's sexual, verbal, emotional, then I have not experienced an adverse childhood experience. But it's not limited to abuse. You also have witnessing violence in the home or community. So essentially, even the community that a child is socialized in can potentially harm them. Can you believe that? So it's not totally limited to the immediate home environment, but even the community. Yeah. Growing up in a household with substance abuse problems or mental health problems. And we know the substance abuse is so common in St. Lucia. The alcoholism, you can almost count in a neighborhood, in a community, how many households have at least one family member with a substance use disorder. So it's really not limited to just the abuse and the neglect. You have parental separation and not having enough to eat. There are many homes where children don't have enough to eat, and all of these are forms and examples of adverse child experiences. And this is why, even before I go into the signs of adverse childhood experiences, this is why it's important for us as a nation, as a society, to be so empathetic, to be compassionate, to be kind as we interact with individuals. You know, many times, and I love to say that, many times the narrative is that, oh, I did not know what Miss Renita was going through. You don't necessarily have to know what she's going through for you to treat her kindly and with respect. And we as a nation, we need to do better. I know we've come a long way, but there's a lot that we can do. So I just wanted to stick that in there because we are sensitizing, we are imploring, we are encouraging every single solution to learn to do better because we can do better. So, what are some of the signs of adverse childhood experiences? If you, as a parent, a teacher, or just a community member, are interacting with individuals, with children, how can you determine whether that person has experienced an adverse childhood experience? So, fear of people. Number one, the child may have difficulty sleeping. And outside of having another emotional challenge, you find that the child usually tosses and turns and is not able to sleep properly. The child may engage in bedwetting. Now, I want to take a few moments to elaborate on this one. You know, in our society, Renita, there are children who wet the bed.
Yes.
And some of them wet their bed, they may be 10 years, even 12 years.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we say, but oh, you're already this old. Why are you wetting the bed? But if you recognize that the child is consistently engaging in bedwetting, then this should be an indication that perhaps something is amiss. Perhaps we need to do some further exploration. Why is that child constantly wetting the bed? And a parent may decide to look at the child's water intake prior to going to sleep. And even with that, you may still realize that the child is continuing to wet the bed. This might be an indication that there is another challenge. Yes, and I know this one is a frequent one. Even in the past, children have been disciplined and flogged and punished for wetting the bed.
Yes.
Yes.
But with this, what do you propose as some of the ways that the parents can assist? Because I remembered having a matter, and then I did ask the parent to take the child in to a pediatrician to find out what is happening. What are some other ways that they can assist the child?
Okay, what you just highlighted, ensuring that the child is taken to a doctor, that is one of the first steps because outside of the emotional and psychological um, issue, the child may very well have a medical condition that is contributing to that. So when that is cleared, what the parent can do is to gently engage that child. One of the things that I always encourage parents to do, and just individuals on the whole, foster that nurturing relationship with your child so that if anything has happened to the child feels comfortable enough to speak to you. You know, many times the children are exposed to things that are happening at the school, in the community, and if they are not comfortable with their parents telling them, well, speaking to them rather, they may not disclose anything. So one of the key things that parents can do is to foster that nurturing rapport, that nurturing, trusting relationship between them and their child. And that makes it a little easier for the child to say, Mommy, Mr. So and so did that to me. Mr. So and so touched my breast or my bum or something. That child will feel more comfortable. But many times children say, Saukadila, Pela, Saukadila.
That's
You
not
know,
true. Don't
that's
tell
not
lies.
true, yes. And it often shuts that child down. Imagine you have your child and that child says, Mommy, Mr. So and so did this. Be quiet. You're always ready for story. And they
Mhm.
often say that, and that child you will just shut down that child. That child will not feel comfortable coming to tell you something. And even when it's more serious. I remember several years ago, there was this little girl that I used to mentor, and I have a love for children. So I used to mentor that little child, and she was just in either grade 3 or grade 4, but really young at the time. And I remember she said to her mom, this particular person said, I would like to, I'm not sure how vivid I can be on Soufriere FM. So perhaps you can indicate how vivid I can be with my information. I believe as much as it's a session for the family, so I want to be very, very careful. But
Yeah.
yes, I'm hearing him say, "Go ahead." So this little girl came to the mom and said, "Mommy, let's just call that person Jack. Jack said I'd like to insert my penis in your vagina." And at that age, now for the moment, I just knew that this child who had said that to this little girl was coming from a dysfunctional home environment. And based on what I knew of the family, I knew that was the case. Now, I'm sharing this very extreme example to highlight that because that child had this comfortable, trusting relationship with the mother and myself, that child was able to say that. Now, imagine that child could not say anything, and then this little boy had attempted to do something to her. And this is why it's important for us to be open. And I was a little reluctant to use the terms, but the reality is that children know even more than us adults. And many times we try to put it on a hush hush, and they know more.
Yes, because and what is sad, and as you rightfully said, what is really sad is that certain persons you don't expect to do anything to children, sometimes they are the ones, and persons do not believe the children, especially in the family. And many times, I'm not saying that it's always the case, but many times that children are abused, it's by a family member. And it is so sad that many times you'll find the family member saying the child is lying, that is not the truth, and so on. Um, with what we've said there, and I'm going to put you on the spot like I did to Mr. Fellow, the
Fair.
right Farron, the last time. We have a calling program, and this is you're the manager here of EEP, and it is open only to civil servants. But
And
have
their family members.
and their family members, right? But have you ever explored or the wider public? Because sometimes, like I mentioned previously on a different program, you find, especially males, they do not want to come into an institution. They do not want to boys, males, they very prideful. So they would, if there's a calling program, They would easier call even a child going through something at home and they feel, okay, I've spoken to mommy, I've spoken to my teacher, nothing is being done. Because I have gotten one or two cases, which is, it hurts my heart, that the child says to me, Miss, it doesn't even make sense to speak to you. I've given up. Nobody is able to help me. I'm good. And it really hurts my heart. So I'm thinking that if there is a calling program, what is, because most children have phones where they could call in to get the assistance that they need. I know there's toll free, but I'm thinking more of along the lines of maybe speaking to a trained professional like a counselor and so on, where they actually can get some sort of help.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that. And I do believe that, based on what I'm hearing you say, I believe you're referring to some sort of a helpline where they can call in, as opposed to, I believe you mentioned something of a program. But this is a very good idea. This is a very good idea. However, from the standpoint of EAP, because we are a work based intervention program that was initially established primarily for public servants and their family members. Right now, as it relates to the capacity to reach out to provide that additional service, that is not currently within our human resource capacity. Notwithstanding that, I do believe that it is a very good idea. It is something that I personally have given thought to, because I can tell you, outside of me being a mental health practitioner, I am heavily involved in church ministry, in community development, empowerment. So I understand the needs of people, and every other person, Renita, is experiencing some challenge. Every other person, and sometimes it can feel like it is just so much because it's just a few of us, a handful of mental health practitioners, a handful of social service agencies that provide that sort of support. So it is something that we can look into, not just EAP, but even the human services and I dare say, all the ministries who can come together to see how best we can help our nation. Because when the problems are not addressed, it affects every single person. There's a shooting, there's violence, it affects every single person.
That is so true because, as I've said before, it seemed to appear now that we are more of a reactive people than a proactive people, because so much is happening, and like what interventions do we really have for all the crime, all the violence, and sad to say, if you look around, you see it's young people, many young people involved in the shootings and so on that is happening. Yeah.
Very well said. Very well said. And many times, and I like the fact that you mentioned that we tend to be too reactive as a nation. And I do hope and pray that as we are getting the information, the sensitization, the awareness, that we are motivated to do better. And it starts with us. Every single person can make a change. It's not limited to mental health practitioners, it's not limited to the social workers, it's not even limited to the government and the politicians. No, every single person can make a change. Even by recognizing that, okay, this person looks a little withdrawn today, stopping to ask, how can I assist you? You don't look like your usual self. Is something wrong? Can I be of support to you? So it's a lot that we can do, and it does not even require too much effort. I dare say that it doesn't.
That is so true. I remember becoming friends with a young lady who worked at a gas station, simply because every time I went, I realized that she was so very serious. Once I said to her, "You are not serving me with such a serious face," and then she said to me, "Well, suit yourself. I said, come on, you can give me a little smile. I know you're having a tough day, but come on, just a smile would go a long way. And she had this beautiful smile. And when I came, she used to smile and we started talking and all. So when especially when we go to places like the supermarkets and the gas stations, yes, we're saying that customer care is very important, yes, but we the customers do have to be nice, because as much as you are getting pressure at your workplace, imagine these people as well getting so much pressure, so you have to exercise patience and be nice as much as you can be. Yeah.
Certainly, certainly, and that's a very good example. I mean, an example just came to mind, which, of course, in the interest of time, I'm not going to share. But it's just little things that we can do. If we notice that, we some of us are blessed with beautiful smiles, or even if we don't have beautiful smiles, we can say something nice to somebody that can, make their day a lot better. So I'm really happy that you shared this example. But as we move on, just a few more signs. If you want to be able to assist somebody and see how, okay, is that person really experiencing ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? Avoiding situations or events that might remind them of previous trauma. Many times we see people respond to certain situations and then we wonder, but why that reaction? They're overreacting.
Yeah.
No, it's not overreacting. There are certain things that trigger certain responses from individuals. And a very common one too with children at school, difficulty in learning, Renita. There
Definitely.
are times children are presenting with behavioral problems. It's not that they're not brilliant, it's not that they do not want to learn, but we have to examine the impact that adverse childhood experiences can have on a child's brain development. As a child, that brain is still developing. That child's brain is still growing. And because of that, when traumatic events happen to them as children, it affects the brain. So growing up, it will have an impact on them. I want you to just imagine a seed. You plant a seed, and that seed is not going to germinate just so. The conditions need to be right. I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks ago I planted some lettuce in my garden, and I'm happy to say that just on Sunday I was able to walk into my garden and harvest, and I had some scrumptious salad. But guess what? The conditions needed to be right for that lettuce to grow, because initially it looked like the growth was really going very, very slowly. But then we had a couple of days with rain, and that did wonders. So the occasional sunlight and the rain did wonders for my lettuce. Think about a child. Just as the seed, the plants need the correct conditions, sunlight, water, that child's brain, that child needs the correct conditions in order for them to be able to develop well. So many times when they're presenting with learning problems at school, it's not because they're not able to, but they are dealing with so many other challenges. And this is why it's important that we just stop, just pause and help. Just pause on the system.
You are
Yeah.
so correct when you said that, because I was just thinking of a situation. And yes, I'm saying to the public out there, because I know teachers will come for me. I was a teacher and I have not forgotten I was a teacher. I love children and I continue to work with children in my profession. One thing I always see as a teacher, the children spend more time in the school um, than they sometimes do at home. That's where they are. So sometimes when you realize that a child is acting up, sometimes that you will be a child will you will remind a child of somebody who hurt them. And just because you remind this child of this person, They will not want to work with you. They will not want to deal with you, and so on. So when you need to find out what is really happening to this child. And if it comes to a case of, you remind the child of somebody, something has to be done. Don't say or same thing I said earlier, suck it up. Or well, if you don't like me there, then too bad. And these kind of situations, because it's all traumatic events that has taken place, and you reminding this child of an abuser or of a bad experience, of course, would cause the child to react negatively. So many times, as teachers, we need to step back. Sometimes, yes, it's all about academics, but we need to step back to find out before we can. One of the things I used to do as a teacher, before I start my lesson, I used to talk to my students, find out from them what is happening. You looking like you want to sleep. What's going on? Did you sleep at night? Did you have breakfast? Have a conversation with the students. And I would always encourage them, if you don't want to speak to me in the class, find me lunchtime or sometime when I'm alone. Come to speak to me. If you don't want to speak to me, go to the principal or your best friend or somebody. So we always create this atmosphere. It's a safe atmosphere for these children. Yeah.
Yes, certainly. You are so on point, and this is why you're such an excellent social worker. Coming, coming out of the teaching profession and now doing social work, and we this is what we need essentially. This is what we need. The example you shared just brought me back to some years ago when I was working as a school counselor in one of the British overseas territories, and there was this particular child who just did not like, in our St. vernacular, we like to say, oh, that person did not like my hair. And I'm going to use it purposefully to highlight this example. And she was just misbehaving in my class. I used to teach personal, social, and moral education, what is equivalent to HFLE here in St. Lucia. And I recognized that there was something more than that. And when we did our clinical supervision, myself and the educational psychologist met with this child, then she was able to say, Miss Jean-Pierre, back then it was Miss Jean-Pierre, I reminded her of her sister, whom she did not have a good relationship with. So every time I sat down, I always, if I had a dress or a skirt, I used to ensure that my knees are crossed and I am nicely seated. Yes, so that reminded her of her sister, and she had a very dysfunctional relationship with her sister. So it was really not about me. And this is why we need to be aware of all of these. And that way we'll be able to create more nurturing environments. Yes. Now I'm noticing that our time is moving very quickly. So we are quickly going to go into who really is at risk of having an adverse childhood experience. First of all, any child who is under the age of 18.
Somebody wants to make a contribution.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello. Hi, good morning. Okay, we'll also call.
I would have loved to.
Okay. I trust that the person gets the opportunity to log in again.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if you want to make a contribution 459-7885. Yes. All right. Again, 459-7885. Shout out to everybody on Facebook who's giving some good reviews, good comments, and of course asking you guys to keep up the good work. Okay.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you so much. So going back to who's at risk for having an adverse childhood experience, first of all, any child under the age of 18. However, a lot of research, Renita, that is quite interesting, is showing that girls are more at risk for developing an adverse childhood experience. And based on what research is saying, a lot of girls are reporting that they have been abused, exposed to abuse more than the males. So imagine, by virtue of the fact that you're a female child, you are more at risk for an adverse childhood experience. And one study found that there was significant sex differences on five ACEs, meaning five examples of adverse childhood experiences, with females being more likely to than males to experience that. So our little girls, our females are at risk just by virtue of being biologically female.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting research. Definitely. Does that stand for now, or is it something that was before? Is it for now still?
It is based on the stats. It is still the case. It
Okay.
is still the case. Yes. And also children who experience socioeconomic challenges. That one, of course, many of us in St. Lucia can relate to. Children who would have grown, been socialized in homes where they did not have enough, poverty, that is also a risk factor. Yeah. Children of parents or caregivers who experience stress.
Okay.
So if you have a parent who was diagnosed with a medical condition or going through any other major stressor, you as the child of that parent is at risk of having an adverse childhood experience.
True.
Children with family members who are diagnosed with substance abuse disorder, and we have so many of them.
True.
Mm-hmm.
You know the song that says, "Dear, I'm not doing that, dear, I'm not." That is a common thing, and we need to get to a place where we recognize that we cannot solve our problems with drugs and alcohol.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Self-medicated.
Yeah.
Do you
Just
have a
yesterday.
caller?
Sorry. No. I was just saying. Just yesterday, I spoke of that, and I said to someone that the use of substance abuse does not help. It's almost like a plaster you put over, you cover
Just masking it.
this, right? So, and then it's not curing, it's just under there maybe getting infected. So it is not helping. It may be a temporary relief, if at all, but then the problem still remains. Yeah.
You are correct. You are correct. And this is why it's important for us to teach our people how to manage their challenges, how to deal with emotional distress. So earlier on, I would have spoken about processing emotions. Many times we're told to, as you would have said earlier, suck it up or be strong. There's no such thing. You experience an emotion. It's important for you to process it. I feel sad today. Okay, why do I feel sad today? And we have to teach coping mechanisms so that when we interact with people, I saw a situation happen right in front of me over the Christmas vacation, and my hand went out to the individual who experienced it. We were at this particular, I was at this particular supermarket, and an elderly lady almost tripped, and there was this gentleman sitting, was standing, sorry, in a line next to her, and when you almost trip, the instant reaction, reflex reaction is to just lean on to, yes, and she did that, and there was this angry outburst, and the poor lady was like, "I'm sorry, I was falling." And said, "I don't care." And that I could have seen that it literally shocked the elderly woman, and everybody just went quiet. Everybody just went quiet because they recognized that perhaps if anything additional had been said, it would have resulted in something, something bigger. And after the person left, I just, quietly engaged her just to reassure her. And she then admitted that she was really feeling the distress from that. Imagine how something like that can make you feel. And to add to that, the way the person looked to it did not add to it. So sharing this example to say that people are walking around with bottles of emotions and so many things, and we just have to be so careful. But we can make a difference by teaching our people how to manage their emotions, how to deal with situations as they come, how to process their anger. Everybody's always vex in our vernacular. Oh, shit, rah, rah. No.
As an officer rightfully made a point at a parents conference. He said that right now social media is raising our children for us, and that is so true. Because if you realize that children or the young generation is not as empathetic as
Mm-hmm.
the older generation. And I'm happy to hear you're saying that. And yes, they do have all the emotions and all. I'm not saying no. But the fact that you cannot be empathetic towards somebody else, it really says something. I have been in a situation where I am going through my own ordeal and I'm literally crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get a call. One of my very close friends would call. I would stop my tears and pick up the call. And sometimes I have to talk to that friend to soothe that friend. And by the time I'm done, I'm no longer crying. So it just shows that sometimes, you have to put yourself out there. You have to put somebody else before you when the situation rises. I could never forget this incident when I was at Teachers College, and there was this girl who committed suicide, and she said that her friend said that she tried to reach out to many of them that night, but something or the other, they were engaged, they were too busy, and so on. And you can imagine the guilt that was felt. So I always encourage persons when somebody reaches out to you, you may not necessarily stay on the phone, but listen to what they say. And if it can wait, then you'll tell them, okay, we will speak about that a little later, or so on. But let me tell you, empathy is really lacking in today's
Mm-hmm.
society. Yeah.
Yes, empathy, compassion, even listening attentively to what is being said.
Yeah.
All these are things that we can do differently and better. It looks like I'm not sure if I'm going to be too forward to suggest that, but we may need to have a part two because there are still so many areas
Most
that we
definitely.
have not
Yes.
explored.
Most definitely. Yes.
Yes, but how big is the problem of adverse childhood experiences? According to the CDC, this is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the statistics that I'm about to share, it was generated from the US. About 64% of US adults reported they had experienced at least one type of adverse childhood experience before the age of 18, and nearly one in six, which accounts for 17.3%, reported they had experienced four types of ACEs. And if I have to go based on even statistics in St. Lucia, even clients have that I have been working with, or that I have come to the EAP, or just general institutions that provide psychosocial support services, these statistics are not far removed from what's happening in St. Lucia. At least one. It's like almost, and sometimes it's maybe it comes with the field, but I can almost always be able to identify an individual who has experienced an adverse childhood experience through interacting, because there are certain signs, certain things that they may present with. Yeah. And I encourage every listener, every person who's logged in. Let's see what we can do differently. Let's see how nurturing we can be as parents, as community members, as spiritual leaders, to ensure that the society that we are living in, we're raising our children in, it's more conducive. Because too many times, even for this year, we've heard of how many murders. And just, I believe it was yesterday, I was having a dialogue with my husband, and I told him, casually, based on the content of the dialogue, that there will always be persons who are presenting with criminal behavior and thinking. because of some things that are just not put in place. And you can almost tell based on the behavior that this child has come from a dysfunctional family. This child is experiencing an adverse childhood experience. But we can do better. But perhaps in our part two, we will delve into some more information.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask a question. Sometimes you hear that it's just too late for a child. Do you believe that as a professional? Um, excuse me. The child is presenting many issues, many misbehaviors, out of control. Maybe this child is maybe around 14, 16, thereabouts. And you'll hear most times person saying, this child is too far gone. It's just too late. No happily. Do you agree to that? What are your views on that?
I believe, Renita, as long as there is life, there is hope. And I don't believe anybody, not just a child, but anybody is too far gone. And I'm going to put context into to that. If a person is recognizing that they need help and they are desirous of getting the help and accepting the help, they are not too far gone. There are situations where, despite the many interventions, an individual simply refuses to see that they need to change. Then in such situations, you will not be able to adequately help that individual, because you cannot help somebody who does not want to be helped. So in this regard, I do believe that as long as a person wants to help, is desirous and recognizes it, they can be helped. Because there are several people who would tell you that I am who I am now because somebody took the time to assist me. I was already 16 and I this is the path that I was on. Many people have these stories. They were in their 20s even, heading to destruction, heading to jail, heading to the cemetery, heading to the hospital.
True.
But somebody took that time to assist them, and now they're spiritual leaders. Now they're lawyers, doctors, farmers, whatever the case may be. So we can always help. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. And it gives you such joy as a professional in what we do when you realize that you could really help. I wish to share something. I hope I hope it's okay if I present something. When I was working in a situation, like I said earlier, that some children believe that there's no more hope. That so many persons have helped, and then there's nothing you can do when you come in, maybe as a new worker. And this person said to me, if you can get me out of that situation, I will take care of you when you get older, when you become an elderly. I said to her, okay. And now, I mean, she is in a better environment, a thriving environment. And every time she looks at me and she gives me that smile. So this really warms my heart. It is very rewarding when you can assist. Yes. And before we continue, I'd like to praise some of the parents who have heard me, could be one or two, to take the initiative of coming to get help for their children for behavioral issues. And I'm very proud of you and continue to seek help for your children. I would love that you do not wait when the problem is already escalating, when the child is already maybe in their teens. As soon as you start seeing the behavioral issues from a young age, you need to take a step if you, as the parent, cannot help. And as Mrs. James said earlier, there may be a reason why your child is behaving the way that he or she may be behaving. So if you cannot assist the child as a parent to find out what is going on, seek help for the child. Do not give up on your child. And this is why I wanted you to hear Mrs. James say, it's never too late. Do not give up on the child and say, that child is all gone. There's nothing that can be done. Yeah.
You are so right. You are so right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we just let me pause the individual get a chance to type their comment or question, Renita.
Well, most persons are like, again, Mrs. Pierre, I've reached out to you and we're waiting your response. I think that's something you have to settle on your end there. All right. Keep it up the good work. Good stuff. Great discussion. Watching Renita and Shacha. Right. Exactly, Miss. Yeah. Good comments, man. All right. Persons are loving and, of course, very informative show. Yeah. Person I say, this person saying, I hope parents who are listening will put some of these things into practice and make our society a better one. And I feel big up, I feel he knows you guys with Stephen Edwards. I think he was a family caseworker as well, right?
Yes, he
Right.
was able.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So kudos to you guys. Kudos.
Thank you so
Thank you so much, and thank you as well because you're part of the solution.
Right. So, guys, that right there was Family Matters. So, till next week, God's willing, from 11 o'clock. Who knows? We might finish this discussion because there's so many points that haven't
Mm-hmm.
been touched. All right. So, who knows? All right. I hope.
Yes, Mrs. James. Who knows?
Sure,
Anyway,
I'm available. I'll make myself available.
all right.
Thank you so very much.
So, this is
Yes,
where we conclude the show. Again, want to thank you, Miss
Mrs. James.
Jean-Pierre,
Mrs. James.
Mrs. James. All right. Gotta thank you again. Have yourself an amazing day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Take care.
Of course, Miss Bondimaitre, on the other